Deeper now on this with Quartz Managing Editor and CNN Global Affairs Analyst Bobby Ghosh, also the former U.S. Commander in Iraq, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, and CNN military analyst and retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Rick Francona. General Hertling, I mean, you've had so much experience on the ground in Iraq. What do you make of the fact that administration and people within the intelligence community are saying they were surprised that the Iraqi military couldn't stand up? Shouldn't more people have seen this coming?
Well, I think, Anderson, Jim's report is phenomenal, but I also think that those of us who were there, who watched some of this, who trained the Iraqi soldiers, I mean, I can tell you times that I've gone on patrol with my counterpart, General Riyadh, and all the soldiers under me went on patrols with their counterpart leaders from brigade commanders, battalion, company commanders. To us, to all of us, it's just been painful to watch this whole thing.
Painful but surprising?
Yeah, that's a hard way to put it, Anderson. Not surprising, because we saw the early stages of what Mr. Maliki was doing. He was replacing very good leaders with his proxies. And if you go, Anderson, I'll make the comparison. If you go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, or Fort Hood, Texas, and replace all the great leaders with guys that are paying for their positions and who are terrible leaders, in a 3-year period of time, those units are going to fall apart too, even though you've got great soldiers under them. And we saw a lot of really great, well, let's put it, saw a lot of really good soldiers in the Iraqi army. They were coming to the point where they were becoming a very good army with very good leadership. And even when I was there in 2008, and that's a long time ago, we were beginning to see the erosion through Mr. Maliki and some of his compatriots in the central government, the erosion of good leadership by replacing the good leaders with not so good leaders.
Colonel, I mean, you could make the argument that this argues in favor of the idea of the U.S. should have kept some sort of residual force, because even though we have the largest embassy in the world in Baghdad, if you don't have American military advisors out with Iraqi forces, clearly the view from the Green Zone in Baghdad doesn't seem all that accurate if the U.S. intelligence community was kind of surprised.
That's right. We didn't have eyes in those units. We couldn't see what was going on. We, as the general said, you could sense that they were changing the leadership, but you didn't know how hollow this force was becoming. And since the Iraqis don't really have the professional NCO corps that we have, there was no one left to keep those units together.
So explain that.
They
don't have the NCO corps that the U.S. military has.
Yeah, that's right. You know, we have you know, the officers who set the tone, conduct the training, and give the orders, but it's the NCOs, the senior sergeants, and then the junior sergeants that actually make things work, keep it together, enforce the discipline. They're the backbone of everything. They get it done. They do the jobs, and they make sure that the units stay together.
And Iraqi military units do not have that.
Well, we're trying to instill that in them, but that takes generations to instill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that corps does not exist, Anderson, is because when we went in there and fired the entire Iraqi army, a lot of those people just went home, and in fact some of them joined the insurgency, and that culture, that military culture, takes a long time to recreate from scratch. You can recruit new people, you can sort of hire new soldiers and train them, but a military culture, as these gentlemen will tell you, takes a long time to establish.
But General Hertling, I mean, all these ISIS, I mean, you know, the numbers of exactly how many fighters ISIS has is in contention. I mean, it's all over the map, and a lot of it depends on how you define it, because there's guys that they've just picked up as they've been taking territory, guys who are unemployed. There's other more hardcore groups. But how come they aren't incapable of fighting on the battlefield? I mean, is it just that they're motivated and they have...
They're motivated, they have support, they're being paid. You know, we've talked a lot about the oil revenues that are coming from some of the facilities. The ISIS fighters are being paid, and they have the will to do the things we're asking for. Some of the key problems, not only in terms of leadership that the Iraqi army had, but frankly, we were even paying some of the Iraqi soldiers in the interim when the Maliki government would not. So we saw early indicators of this, Anderson. And I'd also, you know, I'd like to say, you compare this to, say, a World War II situation where the German army was rebuilt. There were also schools like the Marshall Center that would establish a leadership bond among the senior leaders and even the junior leaders with NCO academies, as Rick just mentioned. That didn't occur in Iraq. We were so busy building an army to fight that perhaps we didn't pay as much attention to the establishment of the leadership, hoping that that would come.
part of the reason why ISIS has been so effective, where the Iraqi army is not. A lot of the people in ISIS are ex-Iraqi army.
Right.
A lot of them are from Saddam Hussein's old army who joined the insurgency and then morphed into this Islamist group. So as I think, as we've said before on the show, some of those ISIS commanders have been to military war college, the Iraqi military war college.
Yeah, these guys know what they were doing. They came down to Euphrates Valley and the Tigris valleys. They know what targets to go to. They know what villages to go to. They know what towns to go to, because many of them were from there. And this overrunning of this installation we saw just this last weekend, that when they came down those valleys, they knew which places to stop and fight and which ones to bypass. This was one of the ones they bypassed, and after the air power slowed them down, then they went back and were cleaning up these pockets of resistance.
General, I mean, obviously, hindsight, it's easy to say in retrospect this should have been done, and certainly there's argument about whether or not it was even possible to do, to leave a residual force. But in your opinion, would that have made a significant difference, at the very least, in terms of the intelligence that the U.S. would have had about the capabilities of the Iraqi military?
Yeah, interesting enough, Anderson, I was there both in 2008 when I saw the Maliki government starting to take away the leadership. I was also in Baghdad in 2004 when the decision was made to disestablish the de-Baathification role.
Right.
So there are, as General Stan McChrystal says, there's plenty of blame to go around over multiple iterations of this campaign, of mistakes we have made that somewhat destroyed the potential for a good Iraqi army. The first one was the de-Baathification law. The second one was not paying as much attention as we should have.
General, how quickly being there on the ground, did you realize, oh, wait a minute, this de-Baathification thing is not a good idea?
Yeah, I happened to be at a conference with 600 Iraqi generals on the day that the de-Baathification law was announced, and there was disbelief among these individuals who we were beginning to see come together to maybe rebuild an Iraq under something other than Saddam Hussein. This was in 2004. And they were with me in this conference hall expressing disbelief that this was happening.
Wow.
So yeah, this goes way back, and I think there's, as I said earlier, there's plenty of blame to go around.
Yeah, General Hertling, appreciate you being on. Colonel Francona, Bobby Ghosh as well. As always, make sure you set your DVR. You can watch us whenever you want. Coming up next, breaking news: what police are calling